Our brilliant panel. I'll let Chloe Nicholls, Head of AdTech at IAB, introduce. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great, yeah, I'm happy for the panellists just to come and sit down. We can get started once we have our mics as well. We've lost one. Great.
You've come.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We are, of course, talking about alternative targeting in a privacy-focused world. And I'd like to, first of all, introduce myself and then ask my panellists to introduce themselves. I am Chloe Nicholls, Head of AdTech at IAB UK and Artiom.
Hi, I'm Artiom, VP of Insights and Analytics at Nano Interactive.
I'm Laura, Chief Data Officer at Havas Media Group.
I'm Phil, Head up Paid Media at Canada Goose.
And Sarah, CRO of Covatic.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all. I think, first of all, just to set the scene, we're aware that there's a huge shift currently in the landscape of digital. There's a move away from certain identifiers, either due to regulation or to them being deprecated, and a need for us to prepare and future-proof ad tech for these updates. And the first question is quite broad and for all of you to kind of speak on, is that how can we prepare for these changes and how have your businesses been preparing already?
We have to start. I mean, I think for us, fundamentally, we just have to kind of look at what the, when we talk about privacy-centric, like what is fundamentally the purpose of I think consumers demand and are looking for privacy, right? And for us, one of the core principles is, I think that there's lots of solutions coming around that they can kind of sidestep or work around the loss of cookies. But the first question I think to ask is, do they kind of respect fundamentally consumer demand for privacy? And we can't predict what's going to happen next in the marketplace. But I think that, we should be prepared that solutions that do try and find ways to work around the regulation, as opposed to respecting the core principles of the regulation, could be vulnerable in the future, right? So I think that's kind of one of the core principles that we take at Havas.
Great, thank you. Sarah?
I think for us, privacy is kind of our foundation. So we were built when GDPR was a thing. So that's in our DNA. And I think it's about getting that balance of audience reach, getting the accuracy of the data, but also just fundamentally making sure that your consumer data is private. And I think, our clients, which are publishers and broadcasters, that's absolutely fundamental to them to make sure that the user right at the end is aware of what's going on with their data.
Great.
Well, we've been spending a lot of time now building out our first-party data and that segmentation and cleaning that up. It's a heavy, heavy lift. It takes a lot of time. There's a huge amount of sources we've got. There's a huge amount of opted-in data we have, not opted-out data we have, or non-opted-in. Trying to establish that and getting the most value from that to a point where we can scale it has been our focus for a long time. And putting privacy at the heart of that is fundamental to us. I think what's incredibly important to us is consumer sentiment and the sentiment of our customers, and ensuring that we're showing up in a way that's not only effective but actually sits well with our customers and with our potential consumers.
I guess I'll wrap up. Well, Nano Interactive is ID-free at its core as a solution. So naturally, we're very much preparing for it and looking forward to the wave that is caused by the deprecation of the third-party cookie.
Great.
Looking forward to
Looking forward. That's not probably the sentiment of many, but yes, I think it's time for a transformation. And Sarah, to your point, I think privacy is such also a broad word which can mean different things, but what does it mean to you in terms of how your methodology is privacy focused, and you touched upon this with your publishers?
So for us, we're all about on-device processing. I'm not a technical person, so to put it in non-tech speak, that just means that the hard work happens at the device level, so whether it's a mobile or a CTV or web browser or smart speaker. So all the heavy lifting happens at that end. So the advert gets put down to the device, and the device basically does the decisioning of, does this audience segment, does this user fit the traits that we're looking for? So in order to advertise to Chloe, we don't need to know you're called Chloe and where you live. We just need to know these are the traits that you've got and they fit with the audience. So for us, it's about making sure that we reverse the whole process, really. And actually, I'd agree with you that it is an opportunity. I think privacy has kind of been a bit of a, oh my goodness, what's coming? We've got to prepare like it's a massive tsunami coming, but actually it's a really good opportunity to clean things up a bit and simplify things and make sure that people are really aware of what they're trying to do, and it's got really complex, and I think this is an opportunity to clean it up a bit.
And Artiom, to that point, that you're quite ready for this, quite excited for it. Do you also think that there has been a shift in perceptions, especially around contextual, due to some of these changes in the industry?
I'll use an analogy that we spoke about just before. Naturally, there's a behavioural shift between brands and agencies coming out, but due to two factors. One is the carrot that the likes of contextual is getting better, more accurate through AI and so on. But the other one is probably the true driver is the stick. And the stick is that deprecation of the third-party cookie that Google has now confirmed will be 100% end of next year. So I think that is the biggest driver. According to our own research, it's speaking to brands and agencies, it's the number one concern amongst them. Behavior is already shifting. According to that as well, 8% was already moving from audience-based to contextual-based this year. That was planned. Now that the Google news are out, I'm sure if we run the panel again, it'll be a much bigger stat. And I do see AI playing a bigger role with that in the future as well.
Okay, amazing. And Laura, I was really fascinated to hear about what you're doing. But I just wonder if you could, how would you sum up what you can uniquely bring to advertisers?
So I think, we've been working on a new solution to contextual cookieless targeting, right? And I think it probably helps to explain why we built it and the principles we built it, because you kind of recognise within the industry there's some pretty kind of fundamental challenges I think that clients are facing. And the first one is perhaps internal for agencies. It's this disconnect often that happens between the strategy, and you build these kind of really rich portraits of who your audience is. But actually the challenge is that frequently a lot of that information, a lot of that richness is then lost when it comes to the activation, right? Because there hasn't been an efficient way to translate those strategic audience insights into the platforms, right? So the solution that we've built is based around how do we make that process as seamless as possible for the first thing. So we created a dictionary of all of the targetable attributes within Google and within Meta, and then build algorithms that just match your strategic audience characteristics directly into the activation platforms. So you don't lose any of that richness then in the audiences that we build, right? So that's the kind of first challenge we're looking to overcome. And the second is kind of facing up to I think AI offers a huge opportunity, right, to make our processes more efficient, to make our buying more effective. But if you look at how the platforms have responded, the way that we're talking to advertisers at the moment is, well, give us all your money, buy broad reach, and we'll optimize it for you. And I think that some of the solutions that are coming out that are powered by AI actually kind of feel a little bit like a black box. You don't really know what's happening within them. And we've definitely lost a lot of transparency, I think, in terms of how that optimization is working. So the solution we've built, it uses AI, but it's totally transparent in terms of where the budget is going, right? And all we're looking to do is pinpoint those audiences that are driving the best responses, right?
Yeah.
And then the third part really is kind of the reality of, clients need to prove the value add of media. But I think also agencies need to prove their value add to clients, right? And all of that should just be judged in, can we deliver better results for clients than what they would get if they use the off-the-shelf solutions in the platforms? And I think we have to face up to the fact if we can't prove that, then agencies really will struggle to prove their value in the future. So again, we've been testing our solution over the last 3 months. The results have been fantastic, but ultimately our principle is, if we don't improve performance by 10%, you don't have to pay for it. And I think that's another thing, that a lot of these solutions can start becoming really, really expensive once you layer in not only tech and data costs, but we were talking as well about all the time needed as well to set these solutions up. So for us, the value of it's proved in terms of the results it delivers. And if it doesn't deliver better results, you don't pay for it. So that's kind of our commitment to our clients, really.
Amazing. And obviously then I think it's natural to come to Phil next to ask how, and we chatted a bit about how long you've been preparing and what your team have been doing, but you obviously need to be making educated decisions when partnering with these solutions, and how do you feel confident to do so?
You've nailed it. Two things that you're absolutely right. One is transparency, because the more you hear about machine learning, let the platforms do the optimization, the more you move away from, the more you lose control, and transparency. And the other is value, right? Well, there's a third actually. A third is my role is global. Many of these solutions excel in certain parts of the world and really don't in others. So I'm yet to find something that has reach beyond sort of North America or Europe. That's a challenge. Transparency is huge. All partners and solutions can explain that they're set up for cookieless future, GDPR compliant, but a legal team will scrutinise that heavily, and it becomes a real challenge when you're thinking about enriching your own first-party data with any other sources about the compliance of those sources, and that's that can be tricky. And the further you move away from transparency, the harder it is to get alignment on that point. And the other major one then is the return, and that's why I think Google are helping these solutions in putting the pressure on to get to these solutions. But we've wanted to do it for years. It's been my ambition to have the bulk of our targeting based on our own first-party data for a long time, but proving the return of these solutions and the scalability at that return is a major challenge. And we look to that point, we look for flexibility in terms of commitment to these solutions, because we need to test and learn before we scale to understand what we can do there. And there's certainly, from my experience, a lot of difference, and some are very inflexible in terms of your commitment, whereas others can be more so.
I think as well, you need to start to look at the return on investment as the total cost of building the thing, which is not only the media cost, it's the data cost, it's the technology cost, it's the cost of time, and all the people who need to be involved in this, right?
Always the hidden information. What am I going to need internally to stand this up? And then you suddenly realise you need a team of 5 that you don't have. And the additional cost comes with that. You're absolutely right.
And do you find that point about transparency, has there been a change, do you think, in the past few years about what you're hearing from vendors about their solutions, or do you still think it's not enough and you have to dig in?
Yeah, it surprises me the sort of the one step forward, 2 step backs that we tend to take in terms of black box solutions, and the major partners are sort of leading the way in that. In anything from sort of Google solutions, Amazon solutions, if they can get away with their black box technology, then why shouldn't anybody else? And it often surprises me what a lack of clarity and transparency there is in these solutions. I welcome them more transparent, because it's very difficult to get brands and internal teams to buy into these solutions, because the fear of not aligning to legislation is real.
100%.
I think just to add to that, in terms of the transparency, that goes across multiple sort of layers. And from the AI point of view, I think that's absolutely the case, where you need to be just really clear what you're using for what. So to your point, Laura, AI is great for getting rid of some of the manual tasks that no one wants to do. But there's machine learning, there's lots of algorithms and other things, but it's having that transparency of what you're using and why. And for us, certainly, we need to really be clear with our clients, who are the publisher side and broadcasters, where are the audiences coming from, because they in turn have to be very clear what, where those audiences are coming from. So the success metric is, for us, is very much transparency of explaining how we get to where we get to.
Great. Well, I'm also kind of aligned because that's been our biggest focus at the IAB for the past few years is transparency throughout the supply chain and privacy and the use of personal data, which is not easy to crack. And speaking of AI and machine learning, I was going to ask you, Artiom, do you think there is an important role that it plays in making us more privacy-centric as an industry?
100%. Nano itself wouldn't really exist as an ID-free solution without the use of AI. Think about it. I think the game really is data, and at least internally we sit on over 3.5 billion live intent signals on a daily basis that we ingest based on, be it understanding intent, keywords, categories, curating intent, sentiment, emotion, be it targeting intent, again, be it device, location, anything like that. And there's so many data signals there that a human cannot really make a decision. And I think as we saw earlier, God, that mic is really resonating. Whether it's agency side or brand side, you guys are looking for outcomes. And if we're able to use AI in that decision making and connect those dots, those pieces, without the use of any identifiers, we can drive meaningful outcomes to agencies and brands, and that's the North Star. So yes, 100%.
Great. There's quite a specific question I was asking you next, which is, which metrics do you see as emerging as the most successful in being able to assess the success of a digital campaign? But it could be a metric or it could be a measurement strategy as well. Would you like to start?
Yeah, well, we're talking about targeting, but actually measurement of full funnel digital is by far the biggest challenge that I can see. We've come from a place of measuring, e-commerce analytics up to setting up econometrics and MMMs.
Yeah.
But you have to get an organisation to buy into that MMM, and something that is retrospective and you need to sort of have faith in it for 6 months or a year. It's very difficult to get buy-in company-wide. So, when we know that these upper funnel techniques and whether we can improve that through contextual targeting or audience targeting is a factor we need to look at. But how you can prove that on an ongoing basis through measurement and incrementality studies and ongoing incrementality modelling is the only effective way that I can see of understanding that impact. Like, there's a lack of trust in impressions now and even attention, really, because we really need to understand how much that's driving the bottom line, and that's a significant challenge. And the emergence of new channels like connected TV is helping that disconnect that we've had between the top and the bottom funnel. For me, incrementality testing studies are an ongoing way, and at some sort of regular cadence and modelling is the only effective way that I can see. I'd love to somebody to tell me something else.
For us, the biggest priority is set the right KPIs, right, to start with, and just understand what's the strategy. Where do we want to get to? And then what are the KPIs that we can identify that genuinely we can prove will link to that final outcome, right? So how do we need to make people think and feel? How do we need to shift attitudes? That might be different by different audiences. But then being able to prove that will then impact the bottom line, often through econometrics, then you can set the right KPIs. And then the trick is, how do we optimize to those KPIs as quickly as possible, right? And that's one of the things I think is quite unique about the Converge solution is once you give it a KPI, it will just optimize automatically in flight to the audiences that are responding the most. So set the right KPI, and then make sure that you're optimizing against that KPI as quickly as possible, I think.
And then also make sure that you're regularly assessing whether you have set the right sort of in-platform, if it is actually joining the dots. But I completely agree.
Yeah, but getting that challenge of getting buy-in for the metrics that you're choosing. Yes. And I guess the other kind of unspoken, well, it's not that unspoken, but what are we as kind of agencies who buy on behalf of clients? Often I think we talk about measurement, but sometimes, if we're still targeted against cost per thousand, right, then that automatically pushes the buying in a specific direction. And I think that proper conversation around setting the right KPIs and proving the impact on the bottom line is where like we all need to be shifting to, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think to follow on your point about KPIs, so our KPIs with our clients are, can you reach audiences that we haven't reached before? So yes is the answer, but what does that actually look like in terms of percentages of increase? We work with Octave very heavily. They're probably in the room, I'm able to say. But we've worked with them in terms of working with Samsung, was one of their clients we work with, about activating people that are using Samsung Buds, who are commuters. So really just pinpointing a target audience that's going to make a difference to them, and then just seeing what that uplift is. Asda was the other one they did. So they were actually targeting people that didn't use Asda, were going to competitive shops. So contextual, but actually real world context is what they were looking for. So yes, it's good to know what they're actually looking at on your website or what they're listening to, but they actually want to know what they're really doing. Are they driving? Are they, all those things? And being able to do that privately is obviously key.
And are there any levers that advertisers have already at their disposal to kind of reach these audiences at scale and still has that sophistication of behavioural and contextual targeting? I think you'd probably all say yes. I think.
It's going to be a fun game coming up, actually. Just think conceptually, how can you target not a vertical that is easy, but an audience that is much trickier in an ID-free world, right? You're almost, I think you mentioned the word black box. It's like, bingo, you're surfing in that area, right? So you need some probabilistic foundation to base that modeling off and then actually create an audience. We've taken inroads into that ourselves, but I think the industry will also take big roads in terms of actually using, be it panel research, behavioral research, to connect the dots, see what indexes highly for, be it a parent or a dog owner, and actually extrapolate by that by market, and in terms of transparency, continue to report on that. So actually close the funnel, conduct the research early on, be it off the shelf or something bespoke, run the campaign, and actually measure not only the incrementality, I think you killed the point earlier, but also the effectiveness of, did I reach the target audience? Did I reach the parent? I think running those brand campaigns and studies post-activation will really be key in the future.
Great.
And the reality is you've got to use a range of different techniques, right? First-party data is incredibly important. It's incredibly important that clients are building their first-party data. But then, it's just, again, it's the transparency and being realistic sometimes about what happens with the deterministic matches, right? If you don't get a high match rate, you end up building a lookalike of the audience anyway, which is, you're kind of doing the same thing, you know what I mean? So it's, I think just being clear about, what's the role for first-party data, how can you use it, how can you use it then to enhance kind of broader targeting strategy as well. But just being realistic, really, about what is going on in these systems. How does, what's the match rate like? Who do we actually end up targeting? Are we targeting our customers or people who look like them?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing most people can agree on is that although it's questionable and cookies and other identifiers could be fallible, they have become quite tried and tested. But the future of how things will look could possibly be more fragmented, but there's also just a different role that these strategies can play across the client and their objective. And obviously, Sarah, did you want to add to that?
It's very easy, isn't it? Everyone's talked about cookies and IDs, and we almost have this sort of mystical, in the past we used to get this wonderful data, and actually it's worth remembering that it wasn't. It's pretty messy. And so actually, I would say we've got the opportunity now, and the solutions out there already that actually are giving us better data and will actually give us better value in a private way. So I think we all talk about the end of cookies like it's horrific. It's actually a really good thing, because maybe this is a chance to have better data.
I do love how the fashion changes though. It's like the postcode, which used to be everything, and then it became very unfashionable. Exactly. Now it's coming back. It's but I do think there's this just kind of chop and changing sometimes. It's like, look, there's a role for all different things. I think we just sometimes go too in on now it's like everything's about first party data. And it's like, well, it's not. It's a part of a solution.
Yeah, it's a mix.
Definitely, and I agree. I think the hyperbole around cookie apocalypse and the death of, but it's going to be the rebirth of something possibly better. So great. And thinking about that, obviously this is focused on the future. What are your visions of kind of how these solutions will evolve over the next 5 years? A big question.
I can start.
Yeah.
So excited. I love it. I think not even 5 years. 5 years is almost too far away. Next 1 year. Next 2 years, imagine this, right? So we've seen the impact of ChatGPT and generative AI and large language models take impact on behaviors of our staff, but also students, kids out there, right? So in 2 years, do a conceptual test. The account manager from a programmatic side, maybe at Havas, who has passed their student exam using ChatGPT, do you think they'll expect to go into, be it a buying platform, be it the big boys Meta, and actually go through a drop-down list of, I want to target automotive, or I want to target an owner? No, you'd want to have a conversation. So either you enter a paragraph of generally what your campaign is trying to do and the outcomes you're looking for, or better still, you have a brief, you upload the brief. It scans the brief, we have the technologies in place now, and it actually creates a segment that is bespoke for you. You can tweak it, curate it, but and I think the user experience will be that much better.
Do you think that person will keep their job though? That's all.
Well, it's up to you guys.
I mean, for me, like when I start to think about the next 5 years, and I think there's a big kind of fundamental question around the role of the agency and the future role of the agency, right? And where we have, my goal would be that we can start to first, we must prove the benefit of having an agency, and you prove the benefit of having an agency by saying, by using an agency, you will achieve results better than what you would have get if you just used the platform, right? That should be the first test. So we need to be able to prove that to clients. That proves our value, and it proves the value of investing with us. So I think that there's potential as we move to kind of more outcome-based models as opposed to cost-based models. Yes. That we can just potentially start to just change the relationship that we have with clients and start to move to more kind of payment based on the results that we're delivering. And I think that that's a kind of healthy model for us all to be trying to move towards, because it means everyone's invested in making the relationship work as hard as possible,
For me, I think wherever we go in the future, the most important thing is that we're consumer-centric, customer-centric and consumer-centric about that. And that's not just in terms of first-party data and how we use that, but meeting consumers' expectations of how they're targeted and how we speak to them. The behaviour and expectations from different media channels has changed so much in recent years. TV, people go to connected TV or any TV expecting to see exactly what they want when they want it. And our advertising needs to show up in the same way. And it's the same on social media, where people expect to feel part of their community and their tribe, and our advertising needs to show up in exactly the same way. So, and the other thing is transparency again, and not just in terms of on the client side, but consumers are so much more aware now. The world is so much more aware of how this all works. When I turned up for my first day at work on a PPC account, it blew my mind what was going on in terms of targeting, and it was all felt like a dirty secret. Everybody knows now, it's all clear, so we need to be as transparent as possible. Contextual targeting, but enriched with first-party data, feels like a sort of a nice transparent approach, but I'm still really trying to work out what's going on today rather than 5 years in the future.
Yeah. Going last, I'm going to go ditto to most of what they've said, but I think privacy will stop being it's a bit of a hygiene thing at the moment, in that everybody's talking about it. Solutions are sort of retrofitting to make sure they fit it. It'd be really nice if it was just something that everybody took for granted, that we are going to treat consumers' data in a private way. So that would be really good if in the next year or so that becomes the case. And I think also it's just, there's no one size fits all, so it's actually about grabbing the opportunities now, and there are solutions out there that people should start trying and testing, and not waiting for this kind of monumental holy grail thing to pop around the corner. Because people that don't get on board are going to be playing catch up. And I think advertising generally, bizarrely, is playing catch up. I think the consumers are well ahead of us in what they're expecting and what they're wanting to be given. So I think we should all just get on with it, stop talking about it, and actually just start giving consumers what they want, which is to your point.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. It was really valuable to hear all of your insights on that. And thank you all for joining us for our discussion. We ran out. Oh, do we still have 5 minutes? I feel like people might be starving as well, but if there are any questions.
We did have time for a couple before lunch.
If you're quick.
I've got one myself to keep you all in the room. What about the role of, I don't know.
It's not on, is it?
No, we can hear you.
You're right, Sam.
What about the role of attention in targeting? Is that something that you're taking into consideration?
I think it goes back to your point. Right?
Yeah.
It's one of those KPIs and metrics that needs to be proved out in terms of its relevance and connection to the bottom line. Right? I totally agree with that process of understanding what our end goals are and then working our way back to understand what are the in-platform optimizations we need to be making on a daily basis that are going to move the needle there. Is attention one of those? Potentially, yes, but it's something that needs to be proved out in that same regard.
I mean, we really like attention as a KPI. I mean, I think for 2 reasons. One is like there is a lot of evidence to prove that it's kind of got better relationship to kind of financial outcomes. But I think the other thing as well, it's just it's a metric that for an agency it's within our control. So we've got a partnership with Lumen, and we can optimize quite easily to attention. I think as you kind of move further down the funnel, more and more things start to affect that KPI. So proving the value of media, incrementality tests and things like that, great, but attention is a really good KPI because we can prove it links to outcomes, and it's something that's in our control to optimize against. So I think it gets the balance right there.
Anything to add, Sarah or Artiom?
No.
I just agree with you guys. It's proving the incrementality. I think that's so hard. Again, I love the black box kind of phrase because there's so many attention measurement solutions out there, right? There's not one standard, and I think that is one challenge the industry is facing. So yes, test, and see what the impact is to the actual bottom line.
Yeah.
And it's to have that mix. I think my addition would just be, it's not all about attention. If you focus on just one KPI, you're going to get in a mess. So it's a mix of all of them, and it's trying to balance the ones that are important for your particular client.
Great.
Got any other questions?
They're all starving.
Can I just have one more on attention?
Sam.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just doing research for my next event.
Okay.
Could you tell me a little bit more about what you think the likelihood is on attention if we start optimizing based on what we call good attention, right? Where you're sat, for a great example, sat in the living room watching the television with your family. Are we going to start seeing alternative targeting optimizers based on those experiences that we know work compared to maybe other media experiences that maybe won't deliver those high attention, and is that when you're thinking about targeting, how much is that going to play a role?
I'd be happy to start. We've signed at Havas. We've got a relationship with Lumen globally, and I think it's really important to be measuring attention. But what we've got a huge amount of benefit from is analysing the historical data as well. Right, because it's not only a media channel that drives the attention, it's about the context that you're in, it's about the environment that you're in, there's all these variables, it's about the creative as well. So I think if we can start, once we get the results in, we can start to run analysis to say, well, what are the variables that define attention, and how can we optimise against those instead of just going against attention as a kind of blunt KPI. We can understand more about the context that maximises attention as well.
And I think you're sat in a really good place to do that.
Because of the data that we
you
have.
have so much data now, you can
totally.
empower that. Interesting piece, I think it was Kantar Link AI research released in the last 2 or 3 months that looked at all of their creative tests over the past, be it decade or two, and actually analyzed all of them and found patterns in that data to see what will actually bring, be it attention or performance, from the creative themselves. So I think using that sort of testing and that sort of behavioral science in conjunction with attention will be
I think it'll be interesting its role in tying together offline channels with digital and how it brings everything together. And I think, to your point, I think attention is something. Having high attention based on the placement of it is an opportunity, but the creative is then still really what drives that being garnered.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Sam.
I've got one more question.
No.
That's it. A massive round of applause to our panel.
Thank you all.